Hey guys, it's Richard Lavignas with IVG. I'm here with Jean Leggett, CEO from One More Story Games. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks very much for having us on the show.
Absolutely. So first off, why don't you tell me a bit about yourself and your history?
Oh, sure. So I like to call myself the hustler of the company. Now, you may not have seen the episode with Blair, my husband. We call him the hacker of the company, and I'm the hustler. And about 2.5 years ago, we decided that since I was the pretty one, that I was really comfortable being in front of people and talking about what we do, that it would make natural sense for me to be the CEO.
Yeah.
But I don't have a traditional trajectory in the games industry that most people do. And for the longest time, when I was trying to get in the games industry like 10, 15 years ago, I would literally send out cover letters that said, I don't have any formal experience, but what I do have is from osmosis.
Ah, nice.
I know. Totally not the way to get a job in the games industry. I actually have an English degree, and I like to tell people that I'm a stand-up comic, not because I'm making it up, but legitimately, I do stand-up comedy, and comedy has infused every part of my life. So as a speaker, as a CEO now, and you know, you kind of need a sense of humor to be leading a startup these days. Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So my getting into games was about 3.5 years ago when Blair started up his company. I was doing my own thing. Now, for most people, they would not want to start up a company with their spouse of 17 years. I don't recommend it. You know, it was really our undoing as a marriage, and it also almost undid the company as well. So I don't recommend working with your spouse, even if you really love them, because we do love each other. But, you know, here was this man who had an incredible passion for games, and you can see that in the way that he talks about the industry and his experiences. And I've watched him be that person in the industry and doing the crunch and doing that insane amount of time. But I'm also a games consumer. I don't call myself a gamer. I'm somebody who enjoys playing games. And I probably spend anywhere from 6 to 18 hours a week playing games. That's kind of my thing. I may have spent a couple $100 on Candy Crush. And I'm not embarrassed by it because women like different kinds of games. There are men who play Candy Crush. It was a very successful game. But I really see my passion and my direction in games as doing something a little bit more sophisticated and getting women to create smart games for smart women. I know, such a long-winded answer, right?
No, that's perfect. And now kind of launching off women as an audience, can you comment on that, but also women in the industry itself, like in your position?
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about women as the audience first.
Please.
We've seen a lot of trends shifting, and what's really interesting, would you be shocked if I told you the fastest growing demographic of games consumers is women over 50?
A little bit, yeah.
So
I would say.
Less gamer, more grandma. So there are actually grandmas who spend more time than their own grandchildren playing games. And my mom's one of them. And Blair's dad totally got sucked into, Castleville? Because Blair was working on Castleville. So dad built up this whole thing. I think he played it for like 2.5 years.
Wow.
Well past its prime. And so you're seeing these older people that are playing games. But women over 18 actually make up a greater percentage of game players than boys under 18. And you're seeing more and more women over the age of 30, and you're seeing more soccer moms. It has a lot to do with the proliferation of mobile technology. You have in third world countries and developing countries, not third world countries. In developing countries, you're seeing people that have mobile phone technology, but they don't necessarily have the funds for a console.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why there's such a huge push for mobile development. You're seeing a lot more women flocking to that. Maybe they're waiting for their kid at soccer, ballet, gymnastics, skating, swimming, and they're sitting there. They have nothing to do, so they're playing these games. And what we're also seeing is that the industry tends to pigeonhole women with the Candy Crush and the Match 3 games. And there's nothing wrong with them, but they feed into those slot machine mechanics and addiction tendencies. I have actually just recently forbidden myself from playing any more Match 3 games because there is something that I become overly unhealthily obsessed with them. And I want to beat the level. So you've got that one side of things where you're seeing the demographic shift in women consumers. They also want different kinds of games. So if you look at any of the ESA reports, women game consumers prefer things that are more story driven, more puzzle oriented, less time panicky, and we're not really into combat games. There are women who play competitive esports. You know, you don't have to go very far on Google to find amazing esports women players.
Absolutely.
But that's not what we typically gravitate towards.
Yeah.
So on the development side of stuff, you know, the number of women in game studios, I think, hovers between 6 to 12%, depending on where you go and what you read. There's not a lot of women who are in game design roles compared to men. When we are in studios, they tend to be in more of administrative support roles because, you know, please get the coffee. Are you kidding me? That's the polite version of that.
Yeah.
So we're capable of so much more. One of the reasons why I love what we're trying to do with One More Story Games is when you create our software that we have, our authoring tool, and you make it easy enough that an 8-year-old has learned how to use it because we've taught 8-year-olds how to use it, all of a sudden you're saying to people, I don't care what gender you are, what your identity is, I don't care what your background is, you can use this tool because you've got a story that you want to tell. And all of a sudden, it's not limited to people who are hardcore coders. And you can have young girls creating content. You can have young women creating content from all sorts of different backgrounds. And that's how you drive that change is you have to, I don't want to say you have to lower barriers, but you have to create more opportunities.
And is that the mission of your company, would you say?
Heck yeah. And
Awesome.
if I said the other word, you'd have to bleep me. Like, for example, my background, I grew up, my mom, my dad, and my sister, they're all deaf.
Yes.
I'm hard of hearing. I wear hearing aids when I'm in situations where I know I'm going to need them. And would an EA or an Ubisoft be willing to take on a story about a young girl who's hard of hearing, whose dad has rejected her because she's not quite deaf enough? That's a story that they wouldn't care about because it's not bankable, right? They have to protect their interests because they're controlled by their shareholders. Yeah. Everything is about shareholder return. That's why they'll iterate on stuff. That's why we're seeing, like, I don't know, before I die, there's probably going to be like a Superman 32, right? Or even more of the franchise. It's like the same story over and over again. There are so many amazing stories out there. Mine may or may not be a hit. There are Indigenous storytellers that we're working with to take their stories and their traditions and bring that into an interactive format. There's somebody in Japan doing a Japanese detective mystery series with us, which I think is really cool. So I want to see more diverse storytelling, and that's not going to happen if we just keep getting more Candy Crush and Match 3 games and stuff like that.
So you're seeking to kind of dive in the middle of that and separate those audiences. That is awesome.
I like to say that we're building games for word nerds. So whenever we go to conferences, we typically stay away from gaming conventions because I'll literally have to stand there going, are you a word nerd? Because if they say no, I'm like, hi, bye.
Yeah.
But they're not our people.
What is the significance of women playing games?
Well, think about it this way. You've got film, TV, music, and games, right? And most people don't realize that games is pretty much coming in second place. The revenues from games, from consoles to software as well, and games and mobile and all of those forms are combined more than film and music, which is crazy. And yet I've always found that when I talk to people about, I make games, I like to put in the tag, I make smart games for smart women and it's about damn time. I still get that judgment because people make that assumption that games are for little boys, and they'll go into that stereotype, the 17-year-old boy with pimples who eats pizza in his mom's basement. And that's the image that we go to games, or games are for kids. But games aren't for kids. We're talking about an artistic medium. And this is where I sort of get my knickers in a knot, if you want to use that phrase. So weird. Here's where I get really excited about it. As an art form, we as producers and as consumers. As producers, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are representing all the stories that we can. So you look at Hollywood, for example, 6% of the blockbusters are directed by women. Do we think that only 6% of those directors are capable of doing blockbuster films? I would say Wonder Woman, hello, great example, right? Fantastic movie, fantastic story, and it wasn't about women, women, women. It was about, hey, listen, here's a really great story that happens to star a woman.
Yeah.
So coming back to the game space, you know, I'm really proud of the work that we do. And if you go to our website and you play some of our games, you'll notice that one of our categories in the dropdown, you know, we've got sci-fi, mystery, thriller, female protagonist. Mm-hmm. And the number of women that have messaged me to say, I really appreciate that you've done that. But here's the secret. Almost all of our games have female protagonists. Hard Vacuum Lullaby is this great half-an-hour space adventure game that won second place for Game of the Year last year. It's all women. Little boys have played the game and they don't care. It's not about women and female and male characters. It's not a conversation about our sexual attraction to each other. It's not a conversation about relationships. It's just a conversation about people. And I really feel like, you know, you look at who is creating the content, and then you look at who's consuming the content. So you have women over here who are almost half the game's consumers, and yet we're not reflected in half of the games that are being created. And that seems really skewed to me. Mm-hmm. You know, 2% of the population has a disability. Do we see disabilities represented in games accurately or even at all? Mm. And instead, we have these weird, like I remember when Blair was working on SSX3, and you had a snowboarder, and her name was Elise. Elise was banging, as the boys would say. Bam, right? Mm-hmm. Every time I walked past that concept art wall, I just thought, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, you're training an entire generation of young men to believe that this is the ideal beauty form, that women's worth is tied up in physicality. Mm-hmm. I know, you kind of got me on this tangent. So I remember when we went to do the artwork for a cyberpunk game that we published last year. It's called Mandatory Upgrade X Marks the Spot. It's actually written by somebody who was raised in Hamilton, and he wanted to write a futuristic story set in Hamilton. So we're like, okay. And our digital artist did this bangin' protagonist. And I was like, no. A little less T, a little less A. I want her to look athletic because she's a cop, but I don't want her to be like this. You know, this has nothing to do with story. That has everything to do with appealing to somebody's baser instinct, and I think that we can do better.
What do you think is going to happen to the video game industry as more women start introducing themselves to it?
I think we're going to see a lot of interesting content. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of women going into VR. There's actually the proportion of women in VR versus regular game creation is much higher. And I know of some amazing women that are doing VR content. I'm super excited about that because I do have some concerns about VR and where that's going and who they're trying to market certain things to. But on the whole, what I'm hoping for is to see more content that is focused on empathy. And the way I see it is, you know, we play games for a couple of different reasons. It's the escapism. So for example, Blair plays CSGO many hours a week to escape, and he's very tactical. Mm-hmm. But I think we can all agree that CSGO is not a story-based game. It's about tactics and strategy and adrenaline.
Yeah.
Whereas the kinds of games that I look forward to seeing created are more along the lines that push that human experience. You know, you've seen some amazing games in the last couple of years, like That Dragon Cancer.
Yes.
You know, and it just really gut-wrenched and really got people. Or Depression Quest, which was highly charged because of the Gamergate thing that went around it. But as an art form and as a medium, we need to be able to express our story in games. So I think we're going to see more biographical content, more deep, meaningful content. So a couple of years ago, Blair and I were sponsoring Story Expo in Los Angeles. So this was all screenwriters. And we thought, oh, screenwriters, those are our people, right? We're trying to find where our people were. And this woman came up to us and she said, I'm doing a documentary on Japanese internment camps. Can I make a game with you? And you just sort of stop. And I said, let's not call it a game. Let's call it an interactive story. Because game has that word association. Game is fun, it's escapist. But what we're talking about there is an experience that's designed to bring out your empathy. Mm-hmm. And we see that. And we're seeing more and more of that. And that's what's exciting to me.
How do you work with the writers?
Well, we work with writers in a lot of different ways. So, for example, we went after Charlaine Harris because we figured her readers are really our core fan, right? It's women over 40 who enjoy reading and who enjoy playing games. So we're going to go after the high profile writers and we're going to work on their content with them or without them. Like we'll get the rights to their stuff. Most of the people that are going to be creating content with us over the next 5 to 10 years are going to be the self-published author who maybe has 1 or 2 books in their pocket and they want to create their content themselves. My ideal writer is somebody who has already got experience under their belt playing RPGs, like role-playing games. They understand the mechanics of what it might look like to create an interactive world, and they want to get their teeth into something that's a little bit more exciting than writing linear stories. So they'll watch the YouTube tutorials, they'll read the FAQ, because, everybody reads instructions, and they will create that content. They can get paired up with one of our game designers and go through that initial planning process. They can continue to work with one of our game designers and they can create their own content. Once they're through that experience, anybody that creates content with us can go and share that with their friends. And Blair and Jean will never see their content. And as long as they abide by the terms of service, no ugly, nasty stuff, no hateful things, etc., that's fine. They can share that content. That's great. But if you want to publish your content, and I think this is a big problem that we're starting to see in the Steam store and in the app stores, is content is not being curated. Oh, yeah. And I think we've taken it upon ourselves to be responsible curators of content. Doesn't mean that we censor people, but that we're looking for something that's going to be compelling to the demographic that we're going after. Right? Because we want authors to get paid, and we also want to make sure that the quality is good so that the story is great, that it's not buggy, that the grammar is points, spot on, that we're not having issues. And then at that point, we enter into a publishing agreement. We split 50-50 right now. It's 50-50 after distribution, and we publish onto multiple platforms for them. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to worry about, integrating various payment mechanisms or learning how to get onto Xbox or, all of these different platforms. We take care of that. That's why we want to be the one-stop shop for story games. And, if they want to create content to sell, great. If an author wants to create a 5 or 10 minute game to promo their book coming out, that's cool too. And we'll put that on the other side of the wall so that everybody can enjoy that, providing that it still meets that criteria of being quality content. Because the last thing the world needs are more sad games where people can't spell. Earlier this week, I got a message from somebody saying, "You make games from books? We sure do." And then the rest of her message was just typo after typo after typo. And I thought, is this because we're on Facebook Messenger, or is this how you write your content? And it really concerns me that there are people calling themselves writers who don't employ best practices like using beta readers and using editors. So we really want to bump that quality up before we'll publish that content.
What happens to your content when somebody publishes with you?
Well, on both sides. So we'll call this the paywall, right? That publishing area. So if you've created content over here and you're sharing it with your friends and family, at the end of a game, when you've completed the whole game, there's a little thing that says, "Hey, thanks for playing the game. Would you like to tip the author?" So there's denominations, you go, tick. So even if you haven't made it over to the curated wall, you still have an opportunity to earn some revenue from your game content creation. And the same thing happens on this side. So somebody tipped Kira, I think it was $10 for her zombie, Attack of the Killer Zombie Cats game, because it's a hilarious game. And that's also something really important. And it comes back to the heart of why we created all of this. I'm tired of seeing artists have, first of all, a poverty mindset. So people who are in the creative fields, this is another little thing that I'll get on my soapbox about, but why do we feel like people who write or paint or create music should do it for free? Why? Right?
You shouldn't.
They are giving other people joy. And if you enjoy their content, you should be paying for their content. They also have to eat and live and sleep and have a home. So just because people are artists doesn't mean that they're less valued in our communities. I think they should actually be making more money, because without art, what is the point? What is the point of our existence? Mm-hmm. Is it just to wake up and go to work and then come home and sleep? That's a pretty dull existence, and you might as well just, hit end game and I'm done. But, we want to make sure that we're building in the mechanisms for people to grow their audience, and we're bringing on people that are going to help train authors and artists how to be better at marketing themselves. So say you wrote something that was really great, because I have a feeling you have a great story in you, right?
Oh, I do.
At least one. So you write something and I'm like, oh, damn, this is really good. We want to publish it.
Yeah.
And then you tell one of your friends. I hope that friend tips you a lot, because you're putting a lot of the burden back on us as publishers. Your job as a creator and as an artist is you need to learn about self-advocacy. It's the same thing in the indie game space as a whole. So you see all of these indie game devs, they've created something, and then they tell 3 people because they're embarrassed and they don't want to ask people to spend money. So I know people that have spent hundreds of hours building their game, and then less than 10 people bought their game. That's gotta hurt. Mm. You gotta be pimping yourself. You've got to be out there hustling. And you don't think that the famous authors of this world, they had to work hard, but they also had to build their backlog of their catalog of content. You think about some of those kids that are at our camps, right? On one of the Fridays, it was the last day of the camp, and this one kid, Carson, totally will never forget this kid. So he made a game called, I want to say it's Dungeon Crawler. And you go through a dungeon and you have to trigger certain conditional logic in order to advance. And he was really into it, super into it. Wonderful kid to be there. And Blair gives all of the kids his business card so they can call if they have any questions. And I kid you not, we get home, it's 5:30 on the Friday, camp has just ended. There's a phone call from Carson going, I'm making Dungeon Crawler 2 and I'd like some help. Think about it. If a really determined content creator decided to make short 10-minute games once a month for the next 5 years, that's 60 short games. Do you not think that each of those games is going to get better and better and better?
Absolutely.
And that people are going to go, hey, you know what? I really loved game number 15. Like they just discovered you at game number 15. They're probably going to go back and play those other games. So you're building that relationship, but you can't do that unless there's consistency and passion. And my big thing is just being professional. So, it comes back to this big thing is you want to create content. Do you want to do it because it makes you feel good? Do you want to do it because it makes you feel good and you want to get paid? Or do you just want to get paid? Because each of those has a different way that you would approach in selling yourself and the things that you're creating.
So given that you are a developer in the industry, obviously you play video games, can you tell me some of your favorite moments of playing video games as a kid?
Well, definitely. I remember we were lucky enough to get an NES like that Christmas. I don't know how my family pulled it off, but we had an NES. And I remember playing Super Mario with my sister and Duck Hunt. Right? Everybody loves that dog.
The dog.
And my sister and I, we don't always get along, but man, when we were playing Contra together, we were like the team you could not beat. So many fun memories. But I will tell you, the moment that Tetris came into my house, Gene, I was so focused on Tetris that if I could just take a 6-month hiatus out of my life to become a professional Tetris player, I totally would. Because I think there's something unique about people who grew up in deaf households. They say that we communicate spatially, we communicate differently. Like sometimes when I'm thinking, I use my signs in my head. So instead of words in my head or voice in my head, I actually have sign language happening in my head. And I don't know, I've tested really high for spatial awareness. And so when I go to play Tetris, I am in the zone. I start at the highest level because why would you want to start it slow? You start it fast and you just go. And I would sit there for hours and man, I loved that game. And even now I still love those puzzle games. This is where we're talking about the addictive personality thing. Yeah. So I don't play this as much. I gave a talk not too long ago and I thought about the history of the games industry over the last 40 years. I just turned 40 this year. So where I was when I was 8 and 18 and the kinds of games that I was playing every 10 years. And when I met Blair, he was playing, like Asheron's Call and Daggerfall. And I could just hear the clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop. But we started playing these adventure games together, like the Tex Murphy series. Have you played the Tex Murphy?
I know of them. I've never played them.
So I love the Tex Murphy series. And I will tell you, one of my most favorite memories of the last 4 years was being able to have a Skype chat for 45 minutes with Chris Jones, the creator of the Tex Murphy series.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yes, a friend of a friend of a friend connected us and we shared what we were doing because, I love those games so much that you didn't have these fancy worlds that you were exploring. It was a point and click adventure game. They later integrated full motion video into them. But I loved it because you had this acerbic detective who was just really, I don't know, he rubbed everybody the wrong way. I was like, I loved the wit because it was about the story. Mm-hmm. So we've played a lot of those adventure games together and that's what I want more of. And then I remember when when Blair worked at EA, they had like a staff store and all of their stuff was you could get yourself in a lottery to get something that was highly difficult to find. So when the Wii first came out, we had it.
Nice.
When Rock Band came out, we had it. I love me some Rock Band.
Amen.
Right?
Oh, one of my favorite games.
Yeah. So we were called like the Red 11s.
Nice.
And I remember, I have some good memories of Rock Band. And, for me, I want to play games that are either by myself, where there's no time limits.
Yep.
One of my favorite games is a world building game called Deadlock. And it has like Enya kind of in the background if you play the Raylu. And the Raylu clan is not about conflict, they're about peace. I'm like, I could play the Raylu forever. If that was one game that I just played for the rest of my life, it would be Deadlock. I don't even think we have the CD anymore and I don't think it would work. And The Sims, if you ask people who were at EA at the time where the Sims were being developed, the number of times that almost got canned because they didn't think that there would be a market for it.
Oh, that game is huge.
Right?
I'm surprised.
It went bonkers because we wanted to be able to create that content.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my personal hygiene took a hit during the first 3 weeks of that game coming out. But I've had a lot of fun playing games. And it's so weird to be on the side of making them now. And when you're in a startup and when you're in the indie space, you wear a lot of hats. So I'm stuck doing a lot of the fundraising. Blair gets to go in there and develop the tech, but he's also working more closely with the content creators than I am. But I'm going in there and I'm like doing the editing and the QA and making sure, is this funny enough? Does this belong in the story? And inspiring people to be like, hey, I never thought about it this way. And there's so many gifts in that. I've seen so many amazing writers who have some great stories that they want to share, whether they're adapting content or wanting to create new content. And I'm excited about seeing what that's going to mean in the long run. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And games that I want to play.
Yeah, of course. Can you tell us a little bit about Danielle's Inferno?
Danielle's Inferno has to be by far my favorite game that we've created so far. It is a dark comedy set in the 9 circles of hell. And you start off at your office called Schrodinger Capital. You may or may not be dead. And you come to realize that you, in fact, are the one that's being resuscitated on the floor. And it is an adult game. So we always say 16 and over because there's some words used in the opening scene that moms and dads, you know what, and it's not even bad words, it's just they're suggestive words. And I would love to say the words because the word always makes me laugh, but it rhymes with ripple. There you go.
Okay, got it.
So you get this cheeky Siamese cat that shows up and it's your spirit animal and it's really quite bitchy towards you, and you find out it's actually a manifestation of your personality. So you, in fact, are the bitchy one. And the cat will take you through the 9 circles of hell. And what it really is an exploration of why are people on the various levels. So for those people who are not familiar with Dante's Divine Comedy, you have purgatory, you have hell, and then heaven. And we only explore, well, I guess we kind of explore purgatory a little bit. We explore limbo. Limbo is the first level that players go into. It has this very surreal, weird music. Did you ever see that movie called LA Story with Steve Martin?
No, can't say
Okay. The game is littered with 80s and 90s movie references because we're nerds, right? There is a sign in the game, like a traffic sign, that if you click on it, it'll talk to you. And you wouldn't think to necessarily click on a traffic sign. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what you need to do, but if you manage to trigger the appropriate conversation, that sign will show up later in the game as an Easter egg, which is kind of cool.
That is cool.
I love that we were able to bridge dark comedy with adult humor. There's a lot of potty humor in there. There's a lot of philosophy jokes in there. There's Monty Python jokes in there. There's Will Wheaton and Stephen King. You know, it was so cool to watch this game be created because I had read my friend Michelle's novel, her novella actually. It's about half an hour long to read. And I went, this would be a really cool, like 20-minute game. Maybe we could just do like a little map of hell and you just click on it, like super simple. Well, it ended up taking us 3 months and we turned it into a 3-hour game. Every single level has its own personality. So you start off in limbo, you go to lust, which has like that 1970s bow chicka wow wow kind of music with some enhanced effects. Then you get to gluttony, and it sounds like drunk Oktoberfest, so a lot of like polka kind of music with some burps and farts and belches and bleh at the end. That's the denouement of that particular string of music. And I love it because it is so weird. And you're not going to see that. You're certainly not going to see that at a AAA studio. You're going to see that from indie games. And when we first had our testers play it, it was so humbling because this one woman, she wrote to me and she said, okay, I didn't really know you before I started playing this game. It is, for me, it beat out her Civ 6 pick of the year.
Oh, wow.
I was like, really? Like, that's pretty high praise.
Yeah, that's huge.
And she's like, it was so polished. It was so thoughtful. I love being able to explore everything. And the more people that do actually, I say to people, if you can, play it in one sitting. It's a 2.5-hour game. And it's like a movie. You wouldn't want to pause it and then walk away from it for 4 days and then come back to it. It doesn't have that same like feel, like that heart tug. And the women who've played the game, let's just say by the time you get to Betrayal, which is the last level, you find out why you're there. And it's deep. And I will give one thing away. I play the voice of Satan.
Oh, nice.
Blair put this like a really weird warble on it. So it's like, what are you doing with your life, Danielle? Much creepier than that. The women told us that when they got to the end, that they were moved to tears, that like literally had to get up to get the Kleenex because they were sobbing when they finished the game. That to me tells me that they were emotionally invested in their character. The guys who played it, they're like, I had the feels. So I know that we've done something that's special that can make you laugh out loud and at the same time make you cry at the end and make you feel good about creating that content. So I'm super excited that Michelle's coming to BoucherCon. We get to show off the work that she's done. How many writers have their own video games? Not a lot. No. So she's kind of a rock star now. And what's really cool is we met Michelle when we were in Dallas when Blair worked for Zynga. She did all of the art for the game.
Awesome.
So she's such a huge part of that game, and I'm so proud. Because if you look at the last 3 years where we've been trying to build the engine, we've been building content, so like laying the tracks down as the train is coming. So we've been building this content, and every game seems to get better. And that's really exciting, and I'm really proud of that game.